I never asked them for anything before. That's how I opened the voicemail. I didn't even want to call, just left a message. Said I was behind on a bill, $150 short. Not asking for a handout, just a bridge. I had just lost my job at the clinic. Rent wasn't due yet, but the utility notice said, "Final warning." I could handle most things, but this time, I couldn't. I'm Paige, the youngest, the one they forgot to check on during holidays, the one who still sent Christmas cards, the one who tried to keep things stitched together while they tugged at the seams. I wasn't crying when I asked. My voice was steady. I said I'd pay it back in 2 weeks, soon as I lined up temp work. I made sure to mention I wasn't looking for a bailout. Just help. Brief, quiet help. Mum called back that evening. I was hopeful when I saw her name on the screen. $150? She repeated, dragging the words. You should have planned better, Paige. Then nothing, just breathing on the other end. That tense, sharp breathing I knew from childhood. Dad came on next. You're not in real trouble. You're just trying to manipulate us with your little emergencies again. I told him. This isn't manipulation. It's reality. You always do this when you want something. Drama. We're done with it. I sat silent for a beat. I'm not begging, I said slowly. I'm asking. We're family. Or so I thought. He didn't miss a beat. You're cut off. Don't call again. Click. The fridge hummed. That's what I remember most, the fridge. Not their words. Not even their tone. Just that low, steady hum in the kitchen. After the call ended, I sat at the table for a long time. Not thinking. Not moving. Just sitting. There's a silence that settles in when a door slams shut for good. It's not loud. It's final. I picked up my phone. Scrolled through our old texts. It was all me birthday wishes. Check-ins. Shared. Photos. Mostly unanswered. I deleted the family group chat. No dramatics. Just gone. The thing that stung wasn't the money. It was how fast they let me go. Like my name didn't mean anything. Like their silence was already rehearsed. It wasn't the first time they looked past me. When I was 16, I won a scholarship for writing. A statewide contest. Award night was at the high school gym. I saved them seats. They never came. My brother had a soccer game. JV. That's who they were. They called it tough love. Said they were raising me to be independent. But all I ever felt was invisible. They loved potential. Not presence. Not me. Just what I could achieve. What I could win for them. I realized that the night of the scholarship, and again now, I passed the hallway mirror on my way to bed, looked at the woman staring back, didn't recognize her. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Certified mail. Legal envelope. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside, 2 pages of formal language. I was removed from the family trust. All contact was to be severed. Any future attempts to reach them, unless for a documented medical emergency, would be considered harassment. No call, no conversation, just a legal shut-off. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. They spent more on lawyer fees than I had asked to borrow. It wasn't about money. It was about power. That letter wasn't triggered by a balance due. It was punishment for defiance. They wanted obedience. I gave them honesty, and they hated that more than debt. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I pulled out my old college notebooks, back when I was studying pre-law, before I had to drop out. I started looking up estate terms, inheritance laws, legal severance. My fingers trembled with purpose. Not fear, not pain. Purpose. There was one thing Mum said during the call that kept replaying. You'll never make it without us. Over and over. You'll never make it. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I looked out the window. The Arizona dusk painted everything gold and red. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't moved in hours. Then I whispered, almost without thinking, "Watch me." I needed a distraction. Just 1 hour not thinking about the envelope. The bolded phrase, "Removed from trust," effective immediately. Dina had texted earlier asking to grab coffee. It sounded better than staring at a ceiling. So I said yes. The cafe was just a few blocks from my place. Familiar. Safe. Until I walked in. There they were. My parents. My brother. Sitting at a corner table. Laughing like we hadn't just severed blood ties days ago. They looked up when I stepped in. No surprise. No shame. Just recognition. Then dismissal. Dad leaned toward my brother and whispered something. He chuckled. Didn't even try to hide it. I stood there, unsure whether to turn or walk over. I chose civility. One step, then another. Hi. Mom sipped her coffee, eyes fixed on her cup. My brother smirked, phone in hand. Dad didn't look at me when he said it. He said it to the room, loud enough to carry. We don't associate with users. Heads turned. Forks froze mid-air. Someone near the counter coughed. Dina stood from her seat, by the window. Eyes wide. Eyes wide. I felt them all strangers, with their half-sipped lattes, watching the moment my dignity got bulldozed. I walked away. I didn't run. Dina followed me out, catching up just as I reached the parking lot. You shouldn't have gone up to them, she said gently. I didn't answer right away. I thought maybe they'd act like parents, I said. You know how they are, she whispered, as if the words might summon thunder. Exactly why they keep doing it. She didn't argue. She just nodded, like someone who had swallowed her own share of things left unsaid. That was the story of most women in our family, keepers of a peace that only served the ones throwing the punches. When I was 8, a vase broke in the living room. It was porcelain, blue floral. I remember the sound it made, like a bell cracking. My brother did it. He admitted it. Later, just to me. But when Mom stormed in, he pointed at me. She did it. And they believed him. No questions. No hesitation. I was grounded for a week. No TV. No sleepovers. No cookies. They called it discipline. I see it now for what it was. Control. They didn't raise me. They trained me to submit. After Dina left, I sat in my car for over an hour. Then, my phone buzzed. It was Jason from college. We hadn't spoken in years. He was now working at a small law firm in Tempe. Hey, his message read. You okay? Saw a video of you online. Thought I recognized you. Video. I clicked the link. There I was, standing frozen in the cafe. Dad's voice echoing. We don't associate with users. Someone had filmed it, shaky footage, but clear audio. It was posted under a thread titled, When Family Goes Full Narcissist on Reddit. It was gaining traction. Nothing viral. Not yet. But enough eyes to matter. I didn't feel shame watching it. I felt seen. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want sympathy either. I wanted a record. Evidence. A history told in my voice. Not theirs. That night, I opened a new document. Titled it, Affidavit of Things They'd Rather Forget. I began listing moments, dates, witnesses, anything that made the truth harder to deny. Pain wasn't the enemy. Fog was. And I was done living in it. I started looking into verbal abuse laws, defamation, power of attorney protocols. The more I read, the more the threads unraveled. My father's name was on several local business documents, including a trust-based nonprofit with tax exemptions. Certain donations were questionable. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet, but I knew I wouldn't do nothing. Before bed, I watched the cafe clip again, paused it on his smirk. I uploaded it anonymously to a local Facebook group. When family shows you what love isn't. I didn't add a caption. By morning, it had been shared over 300 times. The comments? Mostly from strangers. And yet, they understood me better than the people who raised me ever did. It had been 3 days since I uploaded the cafe video. The tension that used to chase me in dreams began surfacing in daylight. Every knock at the door, every email ding felt loaded. I stopped reading comments. They were noise. I turned inward, to documents, filings, anything that could breathe life into my suspicion. My grandmother once said, "You don't beat a snake by screaming, you step on its head." I held that line in my mind. If they wanted to play legal games, I would play smarter. Humiliation turned into investigation. I left my apartment early and drove toward the county records office. Downtown Phoenix looked the same. Cracked sidewalks, palm shadows, a glare of midday sun, but everything felt loaded. I walked into the public records room, heart steadier than it had been in weeks. I requested the property transfer logs tied to the Crow real estate holdings. Slowly, page by page, deed after deed. There my grandmother's land transferred to my brother just last year. My pulse skipped. I turned to the name on record. Familiar. The signature curving just like mine. But older. Faded. Forged. My hand trembled slightly as I photocopied the page. The clerk, a woman in her 60s, leaned over and murmured, "You'd be surprised how often families do this." I didn't flinch. "I'm not surprised anymore," I said, quietly. At home, I laid all the papers I'd collected on the dining table. I labeled a binder. Evidence. 2024. Tabs for deeds, emails, bank ledgers, that disownment letter. I traced dates. Found that my father filed the change within 2 days. After I questioned a business expense in 2020. Was that coincidence or engineered? I thought it over. They didn't remove me out of spite. They removed me to erase accountability. This was never personal. It was a transaction disguised as a betrayal. Later that afternoon, Dina showed up. She brought a bottle of wine, guilt in her eyes. After a moment, she said, "I always knew something was off." She didn't ask forgiveness. She just sat with me. I didn't hand her anything. She pulled out an old folder she'd copied from a shared family computer emails, dating back years, hidden among them. One from my father saying, "Paige doesn't need to know yet." Another, discussion about adjusting the trust. Evidence that removal had been plotted. I felt relief. And grief. That they thought I'd never see. That I'd been written out, even before I'd asked. I opened one email. "She never asks questions." I stared at those words, until they sharpened into knives. My transformation began that moment. Not vengeance, exposure. I uploaded the documents to a hidden drive, labeled proof of betrayal. No announcements, just existence. Late that night, there was a knock on my door. My heart jumped. I peeked through the peephole. A man in a suit held an envelope and a folder. "Miss Paige," he said when I opened. "Your father would like to settle, but only if you stay silent." His words rolled over the threshold like a lie stretched thin. He handed it to me. My name was misspelled. He looked into my eyes, waiting. I took the envelope without flinching. He left. I closed the door. The hallway light flickered, and then I knew he'd already lost. I parked across from the courthouse, engine still running. The sun wasn't up yet, but my mind was wired. I remembered what my grandmother used to say when she sorted bills or reviewed bank slips after Grandpa passed. Truth is hidden in ink and deed. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Every paper leaves a trail. You just have to follow it with steady hands and a clear eye. The courthouse smelt like old toner and floor wax. Sterile halls, marble that echoed each footstep. But inside me, my chest beat like I was running a marathon. I remembered Fiona, a real estate clerk from years ago, telling me in a whisper once at a family barbecue, "Power transfers are never clean." I didn't get it then either. Now I do. I walked into the archive room. No hesitation. I requested chain of title records for every property that had been under our family name. The clerk pulled out files folders too thick for families, without secrets. I flipped through one parcel, then another, and then I found it a plot I thought we'd sold years ago. Only, it hadn't been sold. It had been quietly transferred to Verity 6 months ago. The paperwork didn't scream anything illegal at first glance. But I noticed something. A faint signature at the bottom of one transfer sheet. My printed name. But it wasn't my signature. It mimicked the flow of mine. But not the weight. Not the rhythm. The clerk's eyes twitched when I asked if this file had ever been flagged. She gave a bland smile. "It followed standard procedure," she said. "I took a photo of every page," I muttered to myself. So this is how they erased me. Later that afternoon, I sat at the credit union across town. Safe deposit box open. Old checkbooks laid out. I pulled out slips from college years. My first apartment. My scholarship reimbursement. I compared them to the transfer form. The differences weren't obvious at first glance. But I saw them. The way the G looped too tightly. The way the I was dotted high. They learned my style. Copied just enough to fool a clerk. But not someone who lived in this skin. I whispered. They learned how I write. I tabbed the deed bright orange marker, top corner. It was Exhibit A. in a story that was no longer private, no longer theirs. I went back to the clerk desk, tone even, calm, held the deed out, asked, "Why was this parcel transferred without notifying all parties?" She shifted, uncomfortably. "There was a family directive," she said, eyes glancing toward the mounted camera above us. She didn't want this conversation on record. I leaned in slightly. "Which family?" "Because I own half of it." Her voice dropped. "I don't know whose order, but I know it wasn't me." That was all I needed. Back in my apartment, I dumped the new documents on the table. Everything buzzed. Adrenaline, memory, fury. I stood there for a minute, then sat down. Slow. I replayed the clerk's voice. I went over the deed transfer again. I thought about the spoon my mum used to display, in the china cabinet. Sterling silver. A wedding gift from a cousin she never liked. That spoon came from the estate. The one they were cutting me out of. This wasn't just about money or property. This was identity theft, disguised as family tradition. I texted Dina. "I've got proof, and I'm coming for what's mine." Night fell. I didn't move from the table. Around 10:30, there was a knock. I paused the printer mid-page. Stood. Quietly walked to the door. On the mat, a plain manila envelope. No stamp. No return address. Inside, a single deed page. From the same property I flagged. 2 names were circled. Mine and my father's. And a note. Typed. "Stop digging before you break something you can't undo." No signature. But I knew exactly where it came from. I sat on the couch. The note from that unmarked envelope still in my hand. "Stop digging before you break something you can't undo." I'd read it at least 20 times. The paper wasn't cheap. Heavy stock. Faint cologne scent. The kind my father always wore when he wanted to intimidate without speaking. The words weren't written for clarity, they were crafted for control. A warning disguised as care. That was their pattern. They never got their hands dirty. They sent guilt as their messenger. And guilt had always been the chain they knew I wouldn't break. But this time, I wasn't the same woman who once begged for understanding. I held the note up to the light, watched the ink glisten faintly, and said aloud, "You should have written it in blood. It would have been more honest." I set it down and started typing not to them, but to myself. A manifesto. Every rule I'd lived under. Every silence I'd obeyed. Every false apology I'd accepted. And the final line, "Obedience ends here." The next morning, Dina called. Her voice sounded careful. Too careful. "Hey, there's a small family dinner at Aunt Carol's this weekend. Just dinner. Nothing more." I almost laughed. There's no such thing as just dinner in my family. But curiosity is a strange weakness. "Fine," I said. "I'll come." She hesitated before hanging up, then added, "Please don't come looking for a fight." That told me everything. I didn't need to look for one. It was already waiting. I spent the next day preparing like it was a courtroom appearance. I saved backup copies of my files on a cloud drive, charged my phone, enabled its recorder, practiced answers in the mirror, short, measured, impossible to twist. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head again. Even a handshake can be a leash if it's from the wrong hand. Saturday evening arrived with desert heat that didn't match the chill in my chest. Aunt Carol's house looked the same as always. Too many candles. Too many smiles. The air, thick, with performative warmth. My father opened the dinner with a prayer about unity and forgiveness. His tone, syrupy, calculated. I said nothing. Halfway through dinner, the temperature changed, not in the room, but in the words. My brother set his fork down, looked straight at me, and said, "Why are you trying to make us look like monsters, Paige?" I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it in the center of the table. "Because this," I said, "is what monsters look like. Inside copies of the forged deeds, signatures, time-stamped transfers." My mother's lips parted like she'd seen a ghost. My father's jaw tightened. Dina stared down at her plate. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "From your paper trail," I replied. He tried to speak again, but I cut in softly. "You don't get to punish me for seeing clearly." No one moved. No one breathed. I turned to my mother. "Family doesn't mean immunity from consequence." Her eyes filled. But I recognized that look. It wasn't sorrow. It was calculation. "We were protecting you," she said. "No," I answered. "You were protecting the illusion." The silence that followed was the loudest I'd ever heard. I stood up. No slam door. No theatrics. Just control, quiet, deliberate, final. Driving home. The hum of the tires was the only sound. My hand trembled once, gripping the steering wheel tighter until it stopped. The desert sky looked endless black above, red fading along the horizon. I thought about how far I'd come. From begging for $150 to uncovering real estate fraud. From wanting love to wanting truth. At home, I scanned the documents into a folder labeled Legacy Theft. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then I whispered, "Sometimes healing isn't soft. Sometimes it's standing in the fire and refusing to burn." I turned off the lights, ready to rest for once. But just as I reached the hallway, I heard a soft slide near the door. Another envelope, handwritten this time, clean cursive. Inside, a single sentence. "Meet me tomorrow at noon. I have what you're missing." No name, no return address. But for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in months. Momentum. The dinner invitation sat on my table all day, catching light through the window, like a challenge. Dinner, under peace terms. Verity's choice of words stabbed me before I even opened it. I paced the living room, telling myself, this isn't forgiveness. This is exposure. Finally, I grabbed the envelope, tucked it into my coat pocket, and left. Driving there, my thoughts hardened. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had decided this would be the night I stopped backing down. Inside, the room looked too pristine. The table was perfectly set, candles in place, silence heavy between forks. Verity greeted me with a tight smile. My father's posture was rigid. My mother's gaze avoided mine. I sat, pulse loud, waiting for the first move. Verity stood, and began with the usual lines. Family matters, unity, misunderstandings. Then she shifted. She accused me of stirring drama, threatening the family's name. She slid a document across the table, a signature version of a release she claimed I signed long ago. Their lawyer read aloud. By my hand, I forfeit. I felt my heart hammer. They were staging my silence. I waited until his voice trailed off. Then I said, if you wanted evidence, you should have opened windows, not closed doors. The room went still. Slowly, I pulled out my folder. One by one, I laid deeds, signature comparisons, Dina's emails. Your forgery is transparent, I told Verity, pointing to mismatches. Guests murmured. Verity's expression drained. I touched my phone discreetly. Yes, this dinner was being recorded. Every accusation, every lie. Verity stood abruptly, eyes wide. Get out, she hissed. I rose slowly. You want me to leave? Then watch me exit with what you never deserved. I folded their fake deed, placed it on the table, and walked past them silent, unbowed. Outside, I slumped into my car. The adrenaline crashed. My hands shook. I closed my eyes and remembered who I used to be. Quiet, invisible. I whispered. I survived that version of me. I hid. I was a record on the phone. I was never fragile. I only pretended to be, so people would stop breaking me. That was my vow. Late that night, I worked in my car, files open, screens dim. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. Through the peephole, an unlit car across the street. No one visible. Then a paper sound. An envelope slid under my door. I picked it up. Embossed logo, our family's corporate crest. Inside, a typed sentence. Bold. You asked for $150. Here's what they lost. Below it, a ledger printout. Millions gone. A single name handwritten. Paige. I stared at it. Heartbeat steady. The game had just changed. I walked into the boardroom with my folder tucked under my arm. Shoulders squared. They thought they'd broken me the dinners, the threats, the silencing. But not today. I listed all the weapons I held. Court records, email trails, recordings, everything they tried to bury. I pushed open the door. Verity froze mid-smile. My father's face went stern. The lawyer half stood. Board members whispered. They hadn't expected me to show. Verity rose first. "Paige," she said, voice smooth. "You've been attacking our family's reputation." She clicked a remote. On the screen appeared a video clip, me in heated words, spliced, edited to look out of control. Then slides of emails claiming I threatened litigation for gain. Some board members exchanged glances. I felt the room shift. I held my breath, steady, absorbing every glance. I stepped forward. "Allow me," I said. I projected my files. The original deed from the county archive. The signature overlay comparing her forgery to mine. Dina's emails detailing internal transfers. The presenter switched to side-by-side video versions, theirs. And the raw file. Cuts. Missing context. Deleted lines. It unraveled Verity's narrative. Her face tightened. Board members leaned forward. Uncomfortable. Then I called out Dash, their lawyer. I played a recording. I'd withheld his voice, admitting he accepted payments from Verity to produce fake deeds and suppress dissent. He sputtered. Verity started to intervene, but I held up a hand. The evidence closed down her interruption. Shock cracked the room's silence. When the board chairman asked for a recess, I didn't move. I walked to the seat Verity normally held, sat with purpose. "No recess," I said. "Let's vote. Restore my rights immediately, pending legal review." Some raised hands. Others hesitated. The chair's face went red, but he didn't veto. Verity jumped to her feet. She stood between me and the exit. "You think you've won?" she hissed. I turned, looked at her, smiled calm but fierce. "I just started," I said. Walking out, a board member whispered to another. She just took the room. I stepped into the grand hall. As the doors opened wide, my heart steady. They called this gathering the Crow Family Legacy Forum, but I saw it as their last stand. Memories flickered the nights they excluded me. The signatures vanished, the name I fought so hard to reclaim. The hall was packed. Cousins, board members, press lifters, adjusting cameras. All eyes turned. Verity greeted me with a practiced smile, soft and cold. The irony of her legacy banner loomed above, proclaiming what they'd always attempted to bury. Verity took the floor first. "Paige has waged war against her own blood," she announced. Her voice was calm, but her eyes sharpened. Behind her, a screen flickered to life. She played a clip of me, edited to portray rage, and threat words taken, spliced, context removed. Then came emails, selected lines, painted as proof of defamation. Some board members shifted uncomfortably. Cameras clicked. I refused to look away. When her strike ended, I rose. The projector switched to the confession video she'd hidden uncut, raw, authentic. Twist S. 11. The difference hit hard. Side by side with her version, hers cracked. I followed with Dina's email threads, the full chain of title documents, metadata logs, and finally the phone recording, implicating Dash. Twist S. 15. His voice admitted complicity. Verity's lips trembled. The room shifted. I opened the floor. "Speak now," I said. Several stood. Relatives. Board members. Their voices strained. Apologies. Admissions. Betrayals. Spilled into the hall. The press recorded it all. Live-streamed. And my name echoed on their lips. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant," I said. I refused their term family, when so many acted by deed, not by blood. Mid-forum, Verity pulled a paper. "An injunction," she declared, "to freeze Paige's rights pending litigation." She thrust it toward the crowd. I leaned forward. "Which court? What case number? Show proof," she stammered. "Which court?" The document had no seal, no legal backing. Attorneys whispered. Her momentum stalled. I said, "You spent more energy plotting to keep me out than building something of your own." The moderator called a recess. I stood. As I walked out toward the doors, I saw yellow security tape wrapping around the mansion. Bank execs stepped forward. "This estate is now under judicial seal," one announced. Verity's face went pale in the entrance behind me. Guards blocked her path. Press lights blinded me from every side. I didn't turn. I just said loud enough for all to hear, "The house built on secrets is now sealed by truth." I drove north through fading autumn light, the road flanked by trees afire in gold and rust. 2 months had passed since the courtroom lights dimmed on my family's empire. I needed quiet, not exile, but a place to breathe. The lake cabin waited, silent and unchanged, since I was 10. The door creaked when I entered. Inside, dust motes drifted in shafts of pale sunlight, and the scent of cedar and old ash greeted me like an old friend. I unpacked only what I needed: a stack of books, a journal, coffee in the French press, loose pages of my own story. No grand forecast, no demands. They built their empires with marble. I rebuild with memory. Mornings passed in reflection. I watched the lake calm, under pale skies. My reflection in the window looked older, softer, stronger. I thought again about $150. It had never really been currency. It was a threshold proof I could break out of their definition of me. The house they lost wasn't a victory trophy. It was the return of what rogue justice reclaimed. In a box on a shelf I found my old high school journals. I smiled at teenage entry after entry, full of longing, compliance, silent hope. The girl who once wrote in tremor now sits steady. I read a line I'd penned. "You become what you believe." Oprah's words. They had made no sense then. Now I understood belief shapes you. Explained. I do. I started receiving distant messages. Cousins, extended family, just checking in. Guilt laced their cautious tone. I ignored most. I replied to one with boundaries I'd never had before. "I'm fine. I wish you well." Forgiveness is not a gap across which people return. It's the lock you change for your own peace. My therapist's words echoed. Closure is not an invitation to re-engage. I planted a lavender in a pot that once held ashes from the cabin's hearth. Quiet symbolism, reclaiming ruin into bloom. Then I shifted from healing into building. I announced the Paige Crow Legacy Fund, a modest but firm part of the settlement, a scholarship and support initiative for young women estranged from their families. I named it for my grandmother, the one who told me I had value even when they said otherwise. I recorded an introductory message. No face, just voice. You may be forgotten by blood, but never by possibility. Within days, emails came. You helped me believe again. I thought I had no future. The tears I shed were steady. No shame. Weeks later, an envelope arrived. The final deed, transfer, official. The Crow estate was legally mine. I drove there at dawn. The mansion loomed, ivy-clad, windows dark. I walked the perimeter slowly, noting cracks in stone, the way vines climbed what once looked pristine. I paused at the front steps, running my fingers across the threshold. I did not enter. I whispered, "You didn't break me. You exposed me." Then I left a brass key on the step with a folded note. "Keep your ghosts." I turned away. Back at the cabin, I brewed a final cup of coffee and set up my old camera in front of the window, overlooking the lake. I spoke into the lens. Family is who comes through in the dark, not who shines beside you in the light. I paused. Legacy isn't inheritance, it's contribution. It's not what you're given, it's what you build. I leaned back. To those watching, especially in the 60-plus generation, if you feel stuck, it's never too late to rewrite your story, even if you start with nothing but your name. Silence stretched. Then, I asked for $150. I gave the world $4.5 billion, in truth. I asked $4.5 in truth.